Hello, everyone, and welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. So first and foremost, thank you for being here. My name is Phil.
My name is Pat.
And we're thrilled to have you tuning in today for our inaugural episode. It's pretty likely that most of our listeners will have discovered this podcast thanks to our YouTube channel, where we go over educational airsoft content such as tips and tricks, drills, and so on.
And Pat does everything he can to stay off the camera.
That's right. If you haven't seen our YouTube channel, we encourage you to go check it out, as we're sure you'll find something there that will probably be of interest to you. Throughout this series, we will not necessarily be aiming to replicate our video content in audio form. Rather, we will be taking a deeper dive into various aspects of airsoft, such as gear, game types, mindsets, upgrades, you name it. And we're also open to your suggestions, so if you want to hear us talk about something, please feel free to let us know. We hope you find this content both entertaining and useful. So let's get to it. As Pat and I were preparing for this podcast series, we toyed with a number of ideas for our first episode. We figured, well, maybe we should start by going over, what airsoft is. But it kind of struck us that virtually no one listening wouldn't already know about airsoft.
We imagine you all have airsoft guns and have figured that part out by now.
Yeah, you found our YouTube channel maybe, you clicked through to listen to our podcast, but you don't know what airsoft is. It's pretty unlikely. But then another thought sort of dawned on us. There's a tremendous variation in how airsoft is actually played. Sure, you have, Speedsoft versus milsim. You have even more in-depth variation from specific game types, local community rules, everything under the sun. So that's where we figured we would want to start. What is airsoft to the people who actually play it? And I think a good place for us to start is that first distinction that I brought up, milsim versus Speedsoft. So
absolutely,
we have a little bit of experience with both of those. I mean, we haven't done big 48-hour milsims like Milsim West or whatever. And conversely, we haven't spent a tremendous of time playing Speedsoft, but we have done a little bit of it, right?
We're weird. We fit into sort of a happy or unhappy, depending on your point of view, medium between sort of the two functions of the game, if you want to view them as sort of poles to which you can gravitate.
Yeah, and I think what's really notable is that, especially, the internet is, what it is. We'll just leave it at that. But there's lots of people on the internet who will tell you that, no, milsim is the only way to play airsoft. And then you have other people who are quite happy to play Speedsoft CQB with their Polar Star guns and their bling dangling off their AEGs and wearing whatever colors they want. And, there doesn't need to be that distinction, right?
And it's also really important to note here, we aren't here to tell you guys what you find fun. The idea is kind of silly to me. We rather want to say, all of this is fun. And maybe if you're sitting there going, man, I'm puritanical about one way of playing airsoft, you should try one of the other ones just to goof around at it.
Yeah, like Patrick said, we're not trying to preach to anyone about what you should or shouldn't be doing when you play airsoft. At the end of the day, it's a hobby and it should be fun. But it's important to realize, I think, as a member of the airsoft community, that what people find fun will vary from individual to individual. And so when you're hitting the field, you might, especially if you're playing a skirmish or something on the weekend, different people will find different things fun. So especially from the point of view of a community leader or an organizer, you really want to try and consider what it is that players are looking for.
And as tempting as it is to pretend that everyone's a bot in Call of Duty, you're better off trying to get into the heads of the other players if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about what milsim is all about, a true milsim is definitely not going to be about those, really fast engagements, right? Constant action, CQB, typically you won't see a lot of that in milsim. You may see some of it, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be some of a non-stop firefight action movie, right? A huge part of milsim is, having the opportunity to go out on a patrol, right? To go look for the enemy, try and find where they are, try and take objectives that are not necessarily combat objectives, right? You're taking points on a map. You're setting up, an observation point. You're doing, deploying your resources, whether that's you're sitting down for your rations or you're redeploying your ammo across the line and your, ammo limitations and stuff too.
And practicing a different skill set. I use bushcraft stuff when I'm playing long milsim games that I certainly do not use in a CQB game or even a quick skirmish at the same area.
Not to mention like land navigation skills, like, especially for larger milsims with a lot of open space. Where we play at Redcliffe, it's a very large area, and it's kind of hard to navigate sometimes. But you could very easily get into, your land navigation, your orienteering, using compass and stuff to get around, or at a more advanced level using, a GPS and Blue Force tracker, if that's something that you have available to you, right?
And in fact, at Redcliffe, I've played roles as everything from like a commander through an NCO, through reffing, through just sort of helping people figure their stuff out. And there's a recurring thing where people who know the area really well, who play up there every weekend or every second weekend, do get lost trying to find a specific point on the map.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a skill set, right? And so that's a skill set that you can develop by playing milsim. That's a skill set that you can also utilize playing milsim. And fundamentally, when we've played longer milsim games where we've had to navigate across lots of terrain, we'd have to move for maybe an hour or an hour and a half with no contact. But for that whole time, you don't know where the enemy is, so you're at a heightened sense of awareness. You're doing your proper bounding movement through the woods, you're covering your sectors. That's a lot of fun in and of itself. It's a different kind of fun. And some people might say it's closer to like LARPing or something like that, but you really get you can really get into it. And I think if you only play Speedsoft, you miss out on this whole other aspect of Airsoft.
And I mean, it's also, whenever you're doing anything that's sort of a hobby, I think it's good to try to find things that you can take away from it to bring into other aspects of your life. And I don't mean to say that, we all need to have, heightened situational awareness all the time, but like keeping an eye on your peripheral vision in real life is not a bad idea. If only because I'm a teacher and it means I get walked into by students less often. And I also think that it's really important to think about, so the trail skills that you might pick up playing this kind of game. Hey, you can go geocaching with your girlfriend and look like you know what you're doing, and she will make fun of you less, probably less.
Yeah, that's right. And then, looking at it from the other side, from the Speedsoft angle, there's a lot of skills that you learn from Speedsoft that you don't necessarily get in the same way, definitely not as often in a milsim game. I mean, from Speedsoft, you're learning, your personal skills, like your cover utilization, for lack of a better term, like your twitch gaming, right? Because it's coming down to snap firing and all this kind of stuff, which are absolutely useful skills during a milsim, but they're critical skills for Speedsoft, because if you don't have them and you don't build them, then you're just going to constantly get hit, right?
Totally. I'm not big into playing in the indoor CQB environment here, for a bunch of reasons that we'll probably get into in a later episode. But the guys who do that, man, they corner aggressively and far better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, these are guys, and girls too here in our local community. They're very smart about the way that they utilize their corners, the ways that they, keep their elbows tucked in, and all the good fundamentals that you want to see. And, you can certainly build those skills by doing drills, and you can build those skills during a milsim. But, for Speedsoft, you get to practice them all the time, and it's almost, I would say, an enhanced learning opportunity, because it's almost like an immersion.
Man, I mean, if you put in 3 hours at the local Speedsoft field, right? Just grind out 3 hours of play. You're doing hundreds of ready-ups with an actual target at the other end who will shoot you if you get it wrong. So yeah, that's going to encourage the hell out of you to do it right.
I mean, in fairness, they might shoot you if you get it right anyway, but that's neither here nor there. It's a completely different experience, and there's a huge benefit, I think, for players being able to do both, right? Being able to have those land navigation skills and also those personal skills.
Absolutely. And let's not undersell the fact that, Speedsoft guys, if you are into the adrenaline rush of it, you definitely get mileage out of that.
Another aspect to Airsoft, and I mean, this is, probably a little bit less targeted to our demographic. So if you're listening to our podcast and you've seen our channel before, likely you're the kind of Airsoft player who, wants to get better, who wants to improve, right?
That's certainly the mindset we almost inevitably come at this from. I fully encourage anyone who wants to just, play the game for fun in just chill. I show up, I shoot some BBs, I have a laugh. That's wicked. We have people on our team like that. But the baseline mindset that you're going to get from Phil and I is definitely, I want to get better at this as much as I can, as often as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. But I also think it's important to recognize, just like Patrick said, we have players on our team who are like that, and there are players in your community who are definitely like that. What they want to do is they just want to have a chill time. They want to come out for a weekend. They want to play a couple skirmishes. They want to go out again. They're not interested in playing for 8 hours. They're definitely not interested in playing for 24 or 48 hours. They just want to come in, have these dope ass guns. They have, really cool kit, whatever that is, and they just want to have a good time with it. And that's totally legit too, right?
One of our guys, and he's a really good friend, is known for for shooting as much as possible and being as loud as possible whenever he's playing Airsoft. And, it's rocking. He has a blast. He's a huge amount of fun for us to have playing with us. We never, ever have to worry about lacking for weight of fire.
That's right. Yeah. Shout out to Jerome for that. But yeah, I think it's important to realize that, the people who show up at your field for like a local skirmish and stuff will have a different level of interest. And I don't want to say dedication, because I think dedication has a connotation of superiority. The more dedicated you are, the better you are. And that, this is a hobby. Right? So you get to determine what level of dedication is appropriate for you, right?
And I even think it might be fair to say different kinds of interest, right? So the airsofter who's really, really into having like super accurate kit, who wants to do an impression of one specific thing, he's super dedicated. If he is like, I don't really have time in my life to spend an hour a day training personal skills, hey, he's still super dedicated. He's just got a slightly different interest range than I do, say.
And you raised another really good point, and that this is another facet that, people find interesting in Airsoft. It's the reenacting space. And we have one of our team members, John, who's really into World War II reenacting. And there's a video that, depending on the timing of this podcast, may have already come out or will come out shortly, where he goes over his World War II kit. And it's, it's a 1st Canadian Paratroop impression kit. And, all of it is accurate. Some of it is actually dated from, the Second World War. And a lot of it is, faithful recreations.
Props to him. The first time I saw him in the full kit, I was like, you better have tea. And he pulled out tea. Like, bang on.
Yeah, tea and oatmeal crisp and, a light anti-gas respirator and a toggle rope and everything that, if you look at a picture or you look at video from 1st Canadian paratroopers, or you look, at 6th British paratroopers who they were embedded with, you will see all of that equipment, right? There's a really cool aspect of impression kits and reenactment kits that it is a form of living remembrance, right? And so when you put all this kit on, and I had the opportunity to wear some of John's World War II kit, and it was 101st Airborne kit, and it was all accurate except for the double buckle boots. Yes, I know, you can get off my back about those, but everything else was accurate. And there's something to be said about fighting in a kit that someone else has worn. And if you're wearing all of this kit and you feel maybe 2% of what someone would have felt back then, it's a really vivid form of remembrance. And there's a lot of value to be gained, if that's what you're interested in.
And it also kind of plays into a little the experimental archaeology and just the living history kind of ideas. I do a bunch of other living history stuff. I'm a history teacher by trade. And John has talked me into doing up my own World War II kit. I'm going to do a US sort of GI kit. It'll be super, super fun. One of the things for me is I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to slap it on a student and I'm going to make them walk up and down the stairs in it. Just that will make them a lot more aware of what's going on. Oh man, this weighs a lot.
Yeah. And so, I remember when we were working with Johnny, on his kit, doing some video and stuff, and he's wearing, 70, 80 pounds of kit, right? So you're looking at like 30, 35 kilograms if you're metric. It's a lot, and it's a lot for Airsoft, especially if you're going out for a weekend skirmish and all you're looking to do is sling a couple BBs, but you're also carrying the 70 pounds of kit. It really drives home the experience of a lot of these soldiers in history. And that's true whether your kit is World War II, whether your kit is Vietnam War, whether it's Korean War, whether it's even a modern kit, where you're wearing real plates and you're, trying to kit out yourself to be DevGru or whatever it is, right?
Man, is that heavy.
Yeah, for sure. And we do this for fun. We're not real soldiers, except for Cal. We're not real soldiers. So what that means is we don't carry the same amounts of kit. We're not carrying, firstly, ammunition in Airsoft weighs nothing. Ammunition in real world weighs a lot. Airsoft guns weigh very little. Real guns weigh a lot. There's a lot of differences, but we're also not carrying all the other sort of accoutrements to that sort of come along with being a real soldier. So if, reenactment and impression kits are something you're interested in, that's another thing that you can get out of Airsoft, right? It's not just about playing the game. It's about, what does it feel like? What am I experiencing in addition to all the other stuff?
And for my fellow sort of history nerds and I guess creature comfort lovers out there, there's a lot to be said for being able to take off your World War II pack, break out your little heater and make a cup of tea in the middle of your Airsoft field. That definitely is a benefit. Thank you, John.
Generally, you're doing that during a milsim, though. You're not doing that during a Speedsoft game because you will get lit up.
I am not crazy enough to try that.
Right. I think, the other piece that comes with Airsoft is for my fellow Geardos out there, right? Like, for people who are just interested in collecting, right? Like, there's a lot of really unique kit out there. I myself just got a Taz 83 Alpenflage jacket in the mail. it serves no practical purpose. Taz 83 is a horrible camouflage to try and use in the northeastern North Americas. But, it's really cool. It's really interesting, and it's going to look great in my closet. It's going to look great as, a set piece for some videos that we're going to shoot in the future. And there's a lot of really cool kit out there, and there's a lot to be said about collecting too, right?
Totally. You and John have both given me a whole lot to think about recently in terms of camouflage and like what patterns are useful here. And if I could find some fleck turn in my size, I'd have it on the way already. It's hard to come by. I guess that camouflage is super, super effective here, and it's just incredible. Right? And I would never have expected, looking at it on, Phil's couch, to be like, that works incredibly well. I do not know where John went, and I'm having trouble picking him out.
For sure. And camo is one thing, but there's also airsoft guns, right? So you have lots of people who all they want to do is collect guns. There's several people in our community, but Stefan, for example, on our team, he's got one of those limited edition G28 Heckler and Koch, long range precision rifle airsoft variants.
It's beautiful. It weighs like 80 pounds. But
yeah, well, that's what he was saying too. Like, it's going to live on his shelf. It's going to come out for some light to moderate plinking, but he's never going to game it because the thing weighs 50 tons. Like, it's just not fieldable, but it's really, really cool.
Oh man, I love it. Like, I'm a big dude. I can't field that gun effectively. If I could, I would, because it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk a little bit in a future episode about guns that we really liked. Not necessarily that they were good, that we owned, but that we really enjoyed them.
Yeah,
and I think
look forward to Phil making fun of me for the fact that, like I've said, I'm a big guy, and I love tiny guns, because I'm silly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you're into collecting, like, that's another thing that people get out of Airsoft. So we talked about, gear collecting, and we talked about milsim versus Speedsoft, and how there's a variety of ways to enjoy Airsoft sort of at the macro level. But fundamentally, especially when you're thinking about your weekend skirmishes and stuff, then that's when you get into sort of the bit more micro level around what types of games are you playing. And there's a lot of variation, and we've played game modes that were a lot of fun, that we thought were hilarious, had a really great time. They were challenging, but they were fun.
Absolutely.
And we've also played game modes that we were like, you know what, we're probably not going to do that again. Or if we do, we're going to have to approach it from a different angle, or we're going to have to change the rules because they weren't balanced, right?
Yeah, a bunch of, we've been planning games of various types for years, and we have this recurring thing where it's like, okay, that was fun, except for these bits, which were clearly stupid, we shouldn't do again.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you're gonna plan games or try to figure out scenarios, be kind to yourself. You're gonna make mistakes. At one point, we wrote out like basically 52 scenarios on a pack of playing cards and just dealt one every time we wanted to pick a new game type. And man, we only needed like 8 of those cards.
Yeah, that's right. I think too, if you're the kind of person who's looking at organizing games, one of the most important things that you can do, and I think I learned this lesson a little too sort of late, and I've only really done it for the last 2 larger ops that I've organized, but ask the players for their feedback, right? So at the end of the last 2 ops that I organized, I sent out a survey, and I said, what did you think about this? How would you rate this? What was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Did you think this was balanced? And basically just asking a bunch of questions about game design. And then once you have that feedback, use it to make your future games more tailored to what the players wanted. So in my example, I got a whole bunch of feedback. Some players told me, we didn't think this was really well balanced. Teams could have been balanced a little bit better. Some of the objectives were too hard. So when we redid a very similar op, I made sure to incorporate all of that feedback to give them a better experience. And, it's not to sort of toot my own horn, but I think for game organizers, understanding what your players find fun, right? What do they enjoy from Airsoft is a really, really important part of giving them an experience that they're going to want to come back to.
And to be kind to our past selves a little bit, it's one of these things where when you say it, it's like, oh yeah, that's really obvious. But for the first while, you're like, oh, this is going to be so cool. Like, I came up with this really clever thing. Yeah, I'm excited. And then you hit the field and you're like, oh, that's not working how I thought it would work at all.
For sure. And if you're designing an op, chances are you're designing an op that you think would be fun, that you are going to find cool. But guess what? If you're planning the op, you're probably not going to play it. So the people who should find it cool, they're the ones whose opinion you should be soliciting, right? And asking for some advice on. Understanding that can be hard to do ahead of time because you don't want to spoil a surprise and stuff. But there's ways around that. And I think it's really, really important for everyone who's playing Airsoft to remember. You know what? In your community, you're going to have people who are milsim oriented. You're going to have people who are Speedsoft oriented. You're going to have people who are, oriented to, reenactment and all this kind of stuff. And understanding that ahead of time allows you to create a better experience for those players, right?
One of the things we found, certainly with organizing longer term milsim stuff, is that we often sort of underestimated the time requirements to get from point A to point B to accomplish something. So if we're like, all right, it'll probably take 30 minutes to do this, and we walk it off, and it takes us 20 when we're walking it off. We're like, yeah, 30 minutes is totally fine. But under conditions where everyone's going, bounding movement tree to tree to tree to tree, it takes way longer. And
Definitely.
so those conditions that we did it in weren't really a good test, and we didn't think about that until, at least in my case, the day of, when I'm reffing and I'm organizing and I'm watching people do it and I'm going, ooh, that timer's wrong.
Again, to be kind to our past selves, there's a lot of those lessons that you're going to learn sort of as you go, especially if you're planning your first op maybe, or, you're playing at a different field or something, you're not necessarily going to know.
One thing I want to stress there is also, like, when we started playing, 5 guys, 6 guys was a really good day for us. There were just not a ton of people in our community from the get-go. Even if you're playing with 6 of your friends in the woods near your cabin or something, which loads of people do, if you're the guy going, yeah, let's try this game mode, don't be super discouraged if the game mode doesn't work out. Like, applied creativity is absolutely how this game grows. Just try to take your ego out of it if you can. It's definitely hard. And go, what did I do well there? What did my players like? What did they not like?
So you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's all well and good, Pat and Phil, but I'm not organizing games, so what's it to me? And the reality is, you're still part of a community, you're going to be interacting with players. So let's say you're taking part in the larger game, and maybe you are the commander, or you're the general, or what have you. You're in charge of coming up with a strategy. Well, if you know that certain players like to do certain things, you can task them to do those tasks, right? Maybe there's a patrol that needs to be run, or you need someone to go on a long-range recon or something like that. If there are players who are milsim players, and they're going to just jump at the chance to do that, if you know that, then you can organize yourself accordingly and give them the task rather than give it to someone on the team who doesn't enjoy that type of gameplay. And so not only are you having a more efficient, effective result, they're also getting a better experience, right? And you as a player and a member of community enable that, right?
And to pull back the curtain a little on, like, ops we've run, we will, as sort of game masters, as people running and organizing, we will always create situations where, like, we know there's going to be a firefight pretty regularly because, hey, we definitely play Airsoft to shoot plastic BBs at one another. And so if you're being tasked with something that seems like it's likely to result in a firefight, rather than that long-term, like, go walk for an hour and find me something kind of recon, you can take your Speedsoft players and go, yeah, this is definitely like a short range jog over there and shoot those guys for me kind of thing for them, and they'll definitely be more into that, right? Which is not to say that, they might not find sort of the longer range stuff fun to do and get into, as we talked about earlier, but hey, here's a piece that you're kind of made for, right? We have a couple of people in the local community who love them some LMGs, right? And they would absolutely rather just kip down and set up a huge fire point and pour BBs in that direction, right? That's what they want to do. And man, have we made sure that there are options to do that in our milsim games, right?
Understanding what people enjoy out of Airsoft and what Airsoft is to various people is important if you're planning on organizing games. Obviously, it's important as a member of a community. And one thing I don't want to harp on too much, but it's this notion that everyone in the community is a leader to someone else, right? Whether you're actually, a leader of a team, or you're just a leader by virtue of the fact that you have more experience than someone else and they're looking at you as a point of guidance, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we recently played a game at one of our local fields, and a bunch of younger players have gotten, like, camo and squared themselves up as a team, and I've been doing this for a long time, and they definitely taught me some stuff.
So it's a good thing to consider, what other people are interested in when you're a member of a community, just because it helps everybody grow and have fun doing the things that you enjoy. And I mean, you have a shared point of enjoyment, which is Airsoft. Whether that looks different or not, I mean, you can all work with each other to come up with, a good middle ground where everyone has a good time. The other thing about the types of games that you play is that the game modes as well, not just like your milsim games or your larger events, but even on a weekend skirmish, you want to make sure that you're throwing in game modes that everyone will find interesting. As we were sort of talking about this episode, one of the game modes that Pat and I really don't enjoy, but our community seems to enjoy, is, Trouble in Terrorist Town, or TTT. There's a lot of different names for it. It's like, a werewolf, I think, or,
Yep.
But the basic premise is there's X number of players in the larger group who are the enemy, but you don't know who they are because they're picked by the refs while nobody is looking. And it's their job to eliminate everybody else. And it's everybody else's job to determine who those players are, but nobody knows who's who, and there's a lot of mistrust and all this kind of stuff.
And like Phil said, it's not really our jam, but I think it's really important for us to note that, like, we try to participate as enthusiastically as we can because we want people to have fun. If 10 of the 12 people who are there really like it, then yeah, I'll totally play a game of TTT every 30, 40 minutes. Just, it's all about everyone having fun. Like I said at the beginning of this, I'm not here to tell you how to have fun, and neither is Phil. You know, we'll try anything. God knows we have.
Yeah, for sure. And like Pat said, we're not here to tell anybody how to have fun. But I think what we are here to tell people is you should really consider what other people find fun too, and try and be as inclusive as possible, because everybody has a good time, especially if you have players who maybe are newer players, maybe they're renters, something like that. That helps everybody have a good time and make sure that people come back to the community and you can keep having really large games.
One thing that we used to do a lot that's a game type that we actually haven't played in ages, come to think of it, was we just like grab a couple of people who are willing to sit out for a game and have them be hostages. And that works really well. It's a really fun game type. I will tell you from our own experience, though, if you go, man, let's make this more realistic and make it so the hostage can't walk, and then someone's trying to carry someone like me, it is terrible.
Another game type that we played years and years ago, and we haven't played this, I'm going to say we haven't played this since, 2009 probably. Like, it's been a long time. But do you remember that James Bond game type?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we had this game type where one person was James Bond. They were like this super spy. And they only got to use their sidearm. And their sidearm was considered suppressed, whether it was or not. And everybody else had to play a dumb guard. So you had to ignore as much as possible. You could only shoot from the hip. And if you were hit, you would go and lie down, and then you have to wait for another guard to come over and find you and all this kind of stuff. That was, in retrospect, we had a lot of fun with that. But looking at it from today's standpoint, I don't think that's a game type we'd find fun anymore.
Part of the reason that game type worked when it worked is that we had a much smaller community, right? When there are 8 people playing that game mode, and it's just like, let's do this for 20 minutes and just completely goof off, it works really well. When there are 30 people, A, it'll take one dude a long time to go through that many guards. And B, it's just, yeah, it's not as immersive, right? A lot of people want to be with 30 people going, yeah, game,
Yeah.
right?
So there's a lot of game modes out there. I mean, the sky's the limit, whether you're talking about this or, Capture the Flag or Bomb Rush, or the list goes on and on.
There's an entire internet and several franchises of video games worth of ideas out there.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key point for me with all of this is making sure that you're picking, especially when you're having your weekend skirmishes, that we're picking game modes that are fun for everybody, that are varied, that are trying to be, again, as inclusive as possible. Understanding that some fields don't really accommodate that. Like, I mean, if your local community field is a CQB only field, right? Maybe it's a very small field. There's limited options that you can have. But
there's not a lot of recce to do in a 100-foot by 100-foot warehouse space.
Yeah, absolutely. But there's always the benefit of trying different things out and seeing what you can do. And like Pat said at the start, a lot of our growth in Airsoft games comes from being creatively iterative, right? Just trying new things out and seeing, did that work, did that not work, right?
And be open-minded, right? Like, the newest player of Airsoft in your community might come up to you and go, hey, let's try this game type. And you might be like, man, that sounds kind of to me, like I'm not super into it. But I've had it happen. Give it a try and find it to be amazing. Give it a try and just like, oh man, this was really, really good. One thing that we definitely have done that only works in one of our 2 play fields, right? Like, we play at Redcliffe. It's a much more outdoor environment, nature environment, whereas the other area that we play at is more of a like manicured field with like different compartments. We've played games where it's like, okay, so hunt the small commando team, right? Get 4 or 5 guys who like to ghillie themselves up and run bolt action rifles and have them go hide in the woods, and then a bunch of players with assault rifles go try to find them. And that can be a really enjoyable game mode if you've got players in your community who are hankering to put on a ghillie suit and go hide in the bushes.
Yeah.
You might be surprised to find how many of them you have. I know I have been every time we've tried something like that.
I think the last thing that I really want to leave you guys on is this idea of community. We've talked about it a lot. Community, it's a word that comes up a lot. But what community means is it's a group of people, and you are part of that group as well. So if you're on the other side, if you're in a situation where none of the games in your community are interesting to you, right? Or Airsoft is not what you would want it to be, my advice for you is to really think about, okay, firstly, what is it specifically that you want out of Airsoft? So maybe you've played lots of different games and it's okay, but it's like, every time you go home, you're like, I wish we had done this, or I wish we had done that.
Write those down. Take notes of the stuff that you're like, man, I wish we'd done this. Because sometimes, like, we have as a practice for our team, after pretty much any like game longer than 10 minutes, we go, okay, so like, what did we do well? What did we do poorly? As Phil loves putting it, what are our even better ifs?
Yeah.
Right. And man, like, think about that on the drive home while you're listening to, in my case, your power metal.
Yeah. The other thing is, once you have that written down, once you've really thought about, like, what I really would have liked to be able to do is run an objective game, or I really wish there was a prop, or I really wish, whatever that is. If you're not in the position in your community to be one of the community leaders, talk to your community leaders, right? They are as community minded as everybody else. And so if you have a good idea, you should be putting that forward. Now, maybe they've already thought about doing that and there's a reason why they haven't, and that's okay. And that happens, and it happens to us too. In our, local Facebook group, people says, "Oh man, guys, has anyone considered doing X?" And we go, "Yep, we tried that in 2011 and it didn't work out for the variety of different reasons." And they either go, "Okay, well, can we give it another shot?" Sure, why not?
Yeah, totally.
Or they go, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. No, let's not do that."
Sometimes they go, "Hey, I work in aircraft engineering and I can make us a better prop that will make that so much cooler." And we're like, "Rad, we'll try it, totally."
That piece of advice is really take some time to think about what it is that you enjoy out of airsoft, what you're not currently getting in your community, and work with your community to get on the same page as them, and to let them know. Because the other thing about it is if nobody knows what you want out of it, you're never going to get, or if you do, it's going to take a really long time. Whereas it could be as simple as saying, "Hey, why don't we do this next time?" And everyone goes, "Yeah, sure, let's give it a try." And then suddenly you're trying the thing that you've been wanting to do.
And it can be as small a thing as changing up the ammo loadouts or using maximum minimum ammo loadouts for a couple of games to get a more milsim vibe for the players who are there going, "Man, I really wish this day of games where we play for a couple hours had, a little bit more milsim in it for me." Most people are going to go, if they have access to some mid-caps, going to go, "Yeah, cool, we'll just low capacity our mid-caps for a game." And it's a really different experience, right? Running 30 round mags with your airsoft gun, you really learn to appreciate your ammo.
So, guys, we hope you found this conversation entertaining, informative. The name of this episode is called "What is the Correct Way to Play Airsoft?" And the answer is yes.
Have fun. It's a game. At the end of the day, go enjoy yourself.
So next time, we'll be talking a little bit more about the different kinds of players that we see on the field. These sort of stereotypes. And a bit of a spoiler alert, Patrick and I, have been most of them, but we'll save that for next week.
We may laugh at ourselves a little bit there.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for listening. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel yet and you've discovered this podcast sort of organically, please check us out on YouTube. We're the Storm Riders on YouTube as well. And we hope you find that content educational and informative as well. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.